Watch this.
Six weeks into crisis standards of care, are we any better off than we were? And how much longer will we be in crisis standards? Nearly 100 refugees from Afghanistan will call the Treasure and Magic Valleys home in the coming weeks. But how does the International Rescue Committee plan to house them in Idaho's red-hot rental market? And parents, get ready. For the first time in Idaho, full-day kindergarten is in the budget for 2023. But as we learned today, that budget may only be available for a very specific group of students. Well, thanks for joining us here on the 208 on your Tuesday. And the month of October is typically a slow month for the International Rescue Committee here in Boise. Under former President Donald Trump's administration, the national refugee cap was set at 15,000. In early May, President Biden's administration announced the cap would increase to 62,500 people. And because of the evacuation status in Afghanistan, this month is turning out to be one of the busiest for IRC. Now the Rescue Committee is getting ready to welcome 58 refugees to Boise in the coming weeks. The College of Southern Idaho's Refugee Center is also preparing to resettle another 50 Afghans in Twin Falls this year. Both cities are feeling the growing pains as this is the largest class that will be welcomed in 4 years. So how will this all play out? It's our Katya Stepovic.
This month, we started receiving, the first arrivals, especially from, the Afghanistan evacuee program. So, we're really excited that people have a chance for safety now, especially after, really the 4 last years have been really, really small numbers of arrivals in terms of, historic norms and resources.
Since the year of 2000, Idaho has welcomed 844 refugees from Afghanistan. Georgette Siqueiros, the Development and Community Engagement Manager for IRC, says during their fiscal year of 2021, they saw only 136 new arrivals, but by the end of this year alone, they will welcome a total of 490 refugees and Afghan families.
What's the emotion like when they get here?
When we do airport arrivals, there's, there can be so many different emotions, especially, if it's a family reunification, there's a lot of joy and happiness. Right now, especially with the Afghanistan evacuee program, really, we're seeing some different challenges as well. A lot of people, are arriving in an extremely, emotional state. It's been, just for people who didn't expect to have to be evacuated from one day to the next, it's just a roller coaster for sure. So we see a lot of highs. We also see some lows for sure, but I know that everyone is just happy to be in a safe place and to, start building their new homes.
Housing and homes, things that are not so affordable in the Boise area, and the demand for transitional housing is at an all-time high for refugees.
We're seeing a lot of people arrive at one time, whereas October is typically a pretty quiet month for refugee resettlements. Right now, we're definitely looking at a lot of different, solutions and options. When people first arrive, we look into transitional welcome housing. And so it's definitely a process. Certainly our housing market right now looks differently than it has in the past.
Because refugee resettlement numbers were at record lows during the Trump administration, IRC is feeling the challenge from increased demand. So in response, they're hiring housing specialists and employment specialists to keep up.
IRC will be here. We will continue to be here and work really hard to make sure that all needs are met.
And Katya, I know some good news is that when we have people come into our community from these refugee populations, people want to help. They want to do something to help these new Idahoans. Is there anything people can do over the next few weeks?
Well, there's a lot that people can do, but the big focus right now, Georgette said, is a lot of these refugees come from warmer climates. That being said, they're not used to the cold winters that we get, and they could really use any help with that winter clothing to keep warm. Anything from gift cards as well. And Joe, if someone out there is looking for their next job, they could really use the staff at IRC as well.
Awesome. Well, Katya Stepovic reporting. I know we're going to keep an eye on this as it gets closer to it all unfolding. Thank you very much, Katya. Turning the page now to COVID, the state of Idaho has been in crisis standards of care for 33 days now. North Idaho about a week longer than that. But yesterday, Kootenai Health in North Idaho reported a record-breaking number of patients with COVID currently being treated in their ICU. The previous high was 34. Yesterday, the high was 49 patients. Again, a new record. With so many patients, the hospital is now running 4 makeshift ICUs. 1 non-COVID ICU, 1 non-COVID overflow ICU, and 2 COVID ICUs. We'll show you a look at one classroom at Kootenai Health that was converted into what's now called a low acuity patient care unit. It can hold up to 22 additional people in there. Again, that used to be where they had conference room conversations. Now, just before crisis standards of care was activated, Governor Brad Little also activated the National Guard in late August to help hospitals that were overwhelmed with the large amount of COVID patients. Last month, a 20-person Department of Defense medical response team was sent to North Idaho to help with administrative and medical support. As of yesterday, 123 people are receiving care at Kootenai Health, including 1 pediatric patient. 44% of Kootenai County residents are vaccinated. The entire state of Idaho has been under crisis standards of care for over a month now. You just heard about the situation in North Idaho, but what about the rest of the state? Does it look the same? And what does it look like for the Idaho medical system to leave crisis standards? Are things getting better? Now remember, there are people in our communities that need surgeries and procedures. They are still waiting to get those because there are just not enough resources to help everyone right now. We heard from Idaho medical leaders today, and they explained that there are some encouraging data signs, but things here in the Gem State still very serious on the COVID front. So are things better, worse, or the same today compared to when the state of Idaho went into crisis standards of care, again, about a month ago? Here's Health and Welfare Director Dave Jepson's take on that question.
The number of patients in hospitals, particularly up north and here in the Treasure Valley, is actually higher than when we went into crisis standards of care. In a lot of ways, we're still in a worse situation than we were when we first declared crisis standards of care. We still see very high patient loads, many situations higher than when we declared crisis standards of care. We have added in more staff that have helped out a great deal. But I do not think that we are back to the place where we were when we first entered crisis standards of care. We have a little ways to go to kind of get back to that place.
So with that said, how long can Idaho expect to remain in crisis standards of care? Remember, those crisis standards of care are preventing people from getting those surgeries and procedures. And are those surgeries and procedures a matter of life and death immediately? No, but for people in great pain waiting for treatment, they may not be in grave danger, but they're going to remain in a lot of pain. And as we've heard from you, our viewers who are going through this, they would sure like to have that pain relieved as soon as possible. So how do we get out of crisis standards? Well, they tell us by essentially reversing the criteria we use to go into them, considering things like space and staffing and resources. They need all of that to return to normal before we can return to normal care protocols. Director Jepson explains further.
When we went into crisis standards of care, one of the factors was space. We were seeing patients that were being housed and treated in non-traditional space areas of the hospital. Up north in Kootenai, it was a classroom. Down here in the Treasure Valley, they've converted day surgery units into patient care units. So we would be looking for some of those things to go back to within the normal footprint of the hospital, just like they were before we declared crisis standards of care. Right now, the hospitals are running, even with all the extra staff that have been provided through our federal partners and the National Guard, are still running at higher ratios of staff to nursing than they would under the normal standard of care, or the usual standard of care. So those same criteria that we looked at that moved us into crisis standards of care will be the ones we look at to move us out.
We see your questions every week about when people will be able to get procedures that are put on hold, like we talked about. And for all those people asking if it's going to be weeks or months away, well, those are fair questions, but the answer is we just don't know for now. Director Jepson said today that one of the biggest things that he's learned through crisis standards of care is that the situation is very fluid and not so black and white. There is cautious optimism that things will plateau and begin to improve, like the Delta variant trends in other areas of the country, namely in the southeast part of our country. We saw a major uplift, we saw the plateau, we saw a steady decline. It is wait and see, though, if that trend happens here in Idaho. Idaho healthcare leaders say the best way you and the community can help Idaho get back to a normal situation is by getting a safe and effective vaccine and by taking COVID protocols seriously. They tell us, especially at large events and in big crowds. What are they going to do with our money? We're getting insight on how Idaho lawmakers could spend taxpayer dollars in the near future. One idea that's been talked about for years, full-day public kindergarten. But could the budget only cover some students? We're diving into the numbers. And speaking of numbers, here's ours. 208-321-5614. Text us anytime. Comments, questions, concerns, jokes, whatever. Just be sure to include your name and hashtag the 208. Your comment, question, concern, or whatever could be featured on screen at the end of the show. Still more than 2 years away, but members of the Joint Finance Appropriations Committee met at the State House today for state budget talks for the 2023 fiscal year. Now, budget talks can be very dry, not usually something that makes for a visual news segment, but today there were several items that caught our eye, including, for the first time, funding all-day optional kindergarten. Now, some schools already offer all-day kindergarten, but it is funded locally, not by the state of Idaho. Lawmakers introduced a bill this past session that would fund the program at a cost of $42.1 million per year, with the first 3 years paid for with COVID funds. And that bill never made it out of committee. Back in August, the State Board of Education unanimously voted to recommend that lawmakers do fund all-day optional kindergarten for the state of Idaho. Right now, the state only funds half-day, but today we learned it is budgeted for the 2023 fiscal year, full-day kindergarten that is. However, right now, full-day optional kindergarten is only budgeted for those kids who are considered at risk.
So the request was not to include all of those who want to enroll for kindergarten just at risk would be funded.
That is my understanding, no, that the board voted for all-day kindergarten for everyone, but the superintendent's request does not reflect what the board voted. It is adjusted to account for this at-risk criteria.
It's Jared Tardo, who's the deputy division manager who you just heard from. He says that there are still a lot of pieces that need to be worked out before everything is approved, so this could all change. Senator Janie Ward Engelking, a Boise Democrat who you just heard ask that question, she also brought up the $1.1 billion in the state fiscal recovery fund that have yet to be spent.
One particular thing that caught my eye was where it said that Category B, we can provide premium pay for up to $13 per hour in addition to base pay to workers performing essential work during COVID-19. And in that category, it mentions educators and other school staff. So I guess I'm wondering, I don't see a request for that in this budget or even a placeholder.
And so if districts choose, they could increase salaries, they could do bonuses if it means keeping the schools open.
That is an allowable category under the state fiscal recovery fund for premium pay for those workers who have direct contact with the public, who have high high incidence of direct contact with the public. Those funds could be requested by any agency.
I guess my concern here is that I'm hearing over and over again from school districts that they're losing bus drivers and that paraprofessionals are quitting, and even teachers are resigning mid-year because the working conditions are difficult, and it's kind of a no-win situation. I guess I just want to make sure we're looking at every avenue for providing additional funds to incentivize those people to stay in the schools and help us keep them open.
Again, that money has to be requested through a state agency in order to be approved and distributed. Overall, Idaho agencies are asking for a 6.1% increase from the general fund over the last year. So combined, general fund, dedicated fund, that a request of $11.87 billion. I think that's $1.187. We'll have to check on that. Now, agencies have until October 22nd, this coming Friday, to submit any revisions. JFAC will still need to make a final approval to everything. That won't come until the next legislative session. Now, budget discussions will continue again tomorrow. By the way, if you're keeping score at home, Idaho's surplus has grown to over $900 million. It's been 2 months since the Idaho Supreme Court rejected one of the most restrictive voting laws in the country, Senate Bill 1110. Now, Idaho taxpayers are one step closer to footing the rest of the legal bill. The Idaho Board of Examiners, which includes Governor Brad Little, they met this morning and voted to send the $152,000 bill to the Constitutional Defense Council for the final okay. The bill, which was approved by Republican lawmakers earlier this year and eventually signed by Governor Little, it would have required 6% of registered voters in each of Idaho's 35 legislative districts. Now, but the Idaho Supreme Court overturned the law after Reclaim Idaho, the group responsible for getting Medicaid on the ballot. Well, they sued the state, claiming that the whole thing was unconstitutional. And a judge agreed, saying it, quote, constituted a grave infringement on the people's constitutional rights. The state, aka Idaho taxpayers, have already paid more than $180,000 for private counsel in this case. And that money will come out of the Constitution Defense Fund. Since the year 1995, that fund has paid out more than $3 million in lost court fees. Right now, the fund has a balance of about $1.3 million. And just a reminder for you, early voting now underway in both Ada and Canyon counties. You can vote Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Those locations right now are on your screen. Ada County also has their exciting mobile voting unit at various locations. It's all around the community. And the last day to request your absentee ballot is this Friday, so a handful of days. Early voting ends on Friday, October 29th. The election, Tuesday, November 2nd, less than a month away. What's the farthest you've walked in a day? I have a strong feeling that this fast flock may have you beat. The trailing of the sheep has now traveled from Blaine County all the way down to Ada, and we're taking you there for one of our personal Idaho favorites. Do you have a personal Gem State fave? Tell us about it. Our number, 208-321-5614. Seriously, text us anytime about anything. Just be sure to include your name and hashtag the 208. If you're a regular viewer, you know this. Your text could be featured at the end of the show.
Such a beautiful photo and such a gorgeous view there as you get up in elevation just a little bit, even Camel's Back Park, and then you can see all of the beautiful fall foliage throughout the valley. A couple of nice days ahead of us to do so. I know there's a raindrop here on tomorrow's forecast. It's just a 30% chance. Most of us stay dry all throughout the day, but some of us will see a spot shower. But how about those 70s on Thursday? So Morgan Romero asked me, is that typical for this time in October? Well, we typically see our last average 70-degree or warmer day on October 24th. Last year, we had a 70-degree day or warmer on November 5th. The earliest last 70-degree day or warmer, September 24th, but that was in 1882. The latest, we can get 70-degree days all the way into December. It's happened before. I think as we experience the 70s again on Thursday, that will probably be the last, if not one of the last few of the year. So soak it up if that's your favorite kind of weather. 65 degrees in Boise, now 60 in Twin Falls, McCall at 58, Haley, Sun Valley at 55. In between two systems, this one that brought us all the cloud cover yesterday, departing to the east, and we have this weak system that's going to just brush by for tomorrow. It doesn't really knock down our temperatures a whole lot, but it will bring a lot of cloud cover back to the region. It looks a little bit like the weather of yesterday. If you remember what yesterday was like, a 30% chance of precipitation. Most of us stayed dry. A few of us saw spot showers, and we got warm even though it was very cloudy. Tomorrow will also be fairly breezy, with gusts getting up to around 30 miles per hour with winds coming in out of the south-southeast. Then it's into the weekend, and it's a wet weekend ahead of us. As we have low pressure hanging off the Pacific Northwest coastline, we're just going to continue to see rounds of rain pumping through Fridays, Saturdays, Sunday, Monday. High elevation snow above 6,000 to 6,500 feet as we enter into a very long period of active weather. Again, through the weekend into the beginning of next week, as we see temperatures drop down to top out in the mid to upper 50s for valley locations. It's a forecast to stay on top of. You can do so at ktvb.com.
Looks like we should go get some umbrellas. Well, last week we showed you just a few pictures from this year's Trailing of the Sheep Festival. And for those of you who are new to Idaho, it's an annual event where sheep that graze in the Wood River Valley, they start to make their journey down to southern Idaho for the winter. And today, they made it to Eagle. So Idaho. Check out these pictures from the City of Eagle's Police Department and our viewer Bobby Jean, who posted these pictures to the Idaho Weather Watchers Facebook page. And officers stopped traffic on Highway 55 this morning so that rancher Frank Schertz and about 1,700 sheep could cross the road between 55 and Beacon Light Road in the Eagle area. I want to just say that Frank Schertz is one of the best men I've ever met here in Idaho. He loves his work, he works hard, he's so humble. They will all be in this area for the winter, but around mid-April, the group will start to make its way back to the Wood River Valley and again, crossing Beacon Light and Highway 55 in Eagle. Friendly reminder, any time of year, do not bother the sheep or the dogs if you run into them in the foothills. Take a nice photo from a distance, sure, but please stay away. The dogs can be very protective and the sheep are working. All right, let's wrap up the 208 with a look at some of your comments. We'll start with Shannon. She says, I would rather have my tax dollars go to funding talented teachers and staff for all grades instead of full-day kindergarten, since kindergarten isn't really even required in Idaho. Again, Shannon in Boise. It's a good point, Shannon. I've spoken with lawmakers at the State House that have similar ideas. It's a lot of money right now, over $900 million in a state surplus. It'll be interesting to see what lawmakers do or do not do with it. This person says, Joe, I'm so used to seeing your face and you have done a great job. Thank you. Maybe Brian can fill in for you. Thank you, Tandy. Brian will be back this week, don't you worry. And this person says, Paul says, for truth in labeling, it should be renamed the Unconstitutional Defense Fund, should it not? Good little remark there. It's a good point. A lot of times when they lose, the law that they passed became unconstitutional. So a fair point there. All right, I looked through the messages during the show. I see a lot of you asking for Brian. He'll be back soon. For now, though, we're going to go away. The 208 returns right before 5 o'clock tomorrow.